you. Welcome, everybody. Zeda, Keller Williams. Quick background on myself, about almost 20 years of mortgage and real estate experience combined, more so on the real estate side as about the last 6 years. Ironically enough, about 17 years ago, I met Becky Thompson through the real estate, the mortgage business and process, and we've kind of reemerged years later, and it's been a blast. My cousin Raquel has joined our team recently over the last, about a year now? Almost a year? Okay. In our Keller Williams office. And a lot of times people wonder, and they say, well, you know, where's your office located? It doesn't really matter as agents. We are licensed in the state of Ohio, so we can serve you throughout the state of Ohio. You know, as Clevelanders, we're big on, you live on the west side or east side. So with that being said, our location really is irrelevant. We can serve you anywhere throughout any of the counties. Basically, locally as agents, we'll stay within Cuyahoga County, Medina County, Lorain County, Geauga County, going that far east as well. So is there anybody in here? I know this is a first-time home buying seminar, but has anybody ever bought a home in here? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, so this is not the first time for everybody. And even for those that have bought homes, a lot of times what I like to do is I'll get home buyers that haven't bought a home, let's say in 20 years. Maybe they're renting, or maybe what we don't always touch on is a lot of people never hear the phrase, a first-time seller. We're all used to a first-time home buyer. We're not going to get into the sale process today. That's not what today's session is about. But it's amazing, once you've bought your first home and you go to sell, you have no idea what that process is like. So my point with that is, even if you bought a home before, I tell a lot of people, even my sellers, it's good to come and sit with this seminar in our office because it's been many years. You know, things change, market changes, the process might change, therefore, you know, here, there, and things of that nature. So today, what I like to do is, I'm all about simplifying, keeping things real kind of sweet to the point, and you guys will understand. This is basically like sitting down with me with my clients who have never bought a home before, or maybe have to go through the process to have a good understanding of how it's going to work from top to bottom, okay? Everybody always wants to go look at the houses. I always say that's the fun part. We don't get to do the fun part if you're working with me until we've done two things. We've got a pre-approval from our lender, which Becky will go over that here momentarily. And people say, well, you know, why can't I just go look at the house right away? Well, a couple things. If you're not pre-approved, how do you even know what you qualify for, okay? That's number one. And I would hate to go and show you a house, you know, for $200,000 and you only qualify for $150,000. Okay, so that's a huge part of the process. And also being educated on the process is very, very big in my book, because I never like to work backwards with clients. We never want to get out there and then I'm throwing terminologies at you. I'm asking you to do something and you're looking at me cross-eyed going, well, you know, you never explained that to me, come on. So we don't ever like that awkward, you know, feeling when we're running our business in the process. So the first things first, I always like to tell everybody is, buyers are always real intrigued on how we get paid. They're like, well, wait a minute, if you're running me around and we're spending time and gas and mileage and doing all these things, am I supposed to like cut you a check? That would be great. However, that's not how the process works, okay? So understand, step one, how agents get paid, okay? This is really important because you'll understand even more of the importance down the road once you bought a home and you have to sell a home. So how agents get paid is the seller of the home always pays for the real estate commissions, okay? Never the buyer, it's always the seller. So when we walk you across the finish line as the buyer, okay, then us agents get paid. There's never a separate check or anything you're gonna cut us for our time, our energy, our efforts, okay? So step one, seller always pays for the commissions for agents, both on the selling side and on the buying side to get paid, okay? Closing costs, we ever heard of that? who pays for closing costs? There's two sets of closing costs at every transaction. There's a seller's and a buyer's. Does anybody know who pays for the seller's closing costs?
You can try to get I don't know about the seller may pay for it, but you can try, if the buyer, you can try to get them to pay for yours as well.
Okay, so that's on the buyer, that's a good answer. Anybody know who pays for the seller's closing costs? No, the seller always pays for seller's closing costs, okay? So that's, so already the seller is paying for all the real estate commissions out of the net proceeds of the sale of their home, okay? The seller is paying for their closing costs as part of the transaction, and I'll explain here momentarily why there are closing costs, okay? It's going to transition also into what Becky does as well. Now, buyer, good answer. It's almost there. Buyer has their closing costs, okay? Technically, the buyer is to pay for their own closing costs as well, okay? Now, as this young lady just stated, it can be a negotiation. So closing costs on the buyer side, in the event that our liquid cash, meaning your cash in your checking account, bank account, may be a little tight, okay? There's times where we can ask the seller, also as part of the negotiation process, to help pay for our closing costs, okay? So the real answer is everybody's supposed to pay for their own, but yes, on the buyer side, it can be a part of a negotiation, okay? Closing costs, what are they? Why do we have them, okay? Title companies and mortgage lenders, unless you're paying cash, which doesn't happen too often, most people finance their homes through a mortgage broker, okay, or a local bank. And title companies, they have their own separate job to do all the title work that's required, looking for liens, things of that nature, outstanding taxes, all types of inner workings that go along with the process, okay, that they have to get paid too. So closing costs, to keep it simple, are basically for mortgage people and title companies to get paid to do their jobs as well. That has nothing to do with realtor commissions. Remember, we already discussed the seller pays for that out of the proceeds of their home, okay? So that's how closing costs work. Speaking of lenders, okay? I want you guys to write these 4 or 5 acronyms down. The letter P, the letter I, the letter T, and the letter I. Okay. Now right next to that, I want you to write 2 other letters, M-I. Okay. So P-I, T-I, M-I. Okay. And with that acronym, I will turn it over to Becky momentarily, and then I will come back in to the conversation here as she talks a little bit about mortgage and those acronyms.
Do you want me to just talk about those acronyms, or do you want me to talk about the pre-approval process?
Do it all.
Okay.
Go ahead, and then I'll switch back in, okay?
All right, so my name is Becky Thompson. I'm with Cleveland Mortgage, and my history is I have a little over 10 years experience in the mortgage industry as a loan officer. So I was in it when the recession happened, and now I'm back in it, and everything is completely different than what it was back then as far as rules, guidelines, and how the process works. Okay, so I work hand in hand with the realtors. We're like a team, we're like this, right? So they're gonna send somebody to me to get that pre-approval. All right, so does anybody know what a pre-approval is?
Based on your income, would you qualify? How much houseworthiness are you really worth?
Okay, and do you think it's important to do a pre-approval?
Yes.
It's very important to do a pre-approval. So I love working with first-time home buyers because I love coaching people through the process and educating them on how it works. So when somebody comes to me to do a pre-approval, there's a couple things that we're gonna look at, okay? So I'm gonna take an application with you. We can do it face-to-face, or I'll do it over the phone, which takes 10 minutes. I'm just gathering some basic information from you. Once I get that, I'm gonna check your credit, okay? And this is where you're gonna come in. So when I pull your credit, I'm pulling 3 bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. and you're gonna have 3 scores that report. For mortgage purposes, we're gonna qualify you off of the middle credit score, okay? And so certain programs require certain credit scores, okay? So that's the first thing I'm gonna do. After I pull your credit, I'm gonna run it through my automated underwriting system, and what that's gonna do is it's going to allow me to see what programs you qualify for and for how much. And this is important because, as Jeff mentioned, you don't wanna go out, look at a house, fall in love with it, and then come to me for your pre-approval and find out that you can't afford it. It's the worst feeling. You don't want to feel that way. And Jeff definitely doesn't want you to feel that way. Okay, so once I get that information, I'm gonna call you back and I'm gonna go over all of the details. Couple things that we're looking at is your debt to income ratio. So that is your new mortgage payment plus any liabilities that are on your credit report. And that includes student loans. We were just talking about that. So if you have student loans, that's gonna be included in your liabilities. A long time ago, they didn't include those, but today, we have to include a payment even if they're deferred. Okay, so when Jeff was talking about PITI, P stands for principal, I stands for interest, T stands for taxes, and I stands for insurance. And then MI stands for, I call it PMI on my side, so if you've heard of PMI, it's the same thing as MI. It stands for private mortgage insurance. Anytime you put less than 20% down on a home, you're required to pay private mortgage insurance. And it's included in your monthly payment and the monthly liabilities. Does anybody know why you pay private mortgage insurance if you put less than 20% down?
Is your risk.
Exactly. So it's a more of a risk to the bank or lender, and so because they're allowing you to put less down, that's gonna protect them if there's any kind of default or something like that on the loan. Okay, any questions on that?
Most people, real quick, would think that we hear only PMI or MI in an FHA type of loan. Yes, that is true. However, conventional loan products also will carry MI in the event
Of less than 20% down. So when I'm looking at the different programs, you know, there's an FHA program, which is a government-backed program, and then there's conventional programs. So there's a big difference as far as rules, regulations, and all that good stuff. So an FHA loan will allow you to put 3.5% down. A conventional loan, I mean, I have a bunch of them out there, but generally speaking, you're gonna be required to put at least 5% down, okay? And the big difference, and what I really like to educate my buyers on, is that PMI aspect. Because on a conventional loan, if you have the PMI on there, it has the ability to fall off after 11 years, or when you have that 20% equity in the home. On an FHA loan, there's 2 aspects to mortgage insurance. One is the monthly PMI. Okay, on FHA, that stays on the loan for the life of the loan. It never falls off unless you refinance, okay? And then the other one is called an upfront mortgage insurance premium, okay? This is money that they're tacking onto your loan amount. Again, because it's a risk, because they're allowing you to put 3.5% down. So those are 2 really important things to know when you're trying to decide, you know, should I go FHA or should I go conventional? When I run somebody's information, I'm looking at every program that I have available to see what's going to be the best for that person and their situation. Because every single person that comes to me, totally different from the next person that comes. Every situation is completely different. What else can I tell you guys? I think that's about it. I mean, like I said, I just really like to educate you through the process and how it works. So once I get all that information, I'm going to call you. I'm going to tell you what your credit scores are, and I'm going to tell you what I can qualify you for and for how much. Say you come to me and I can't qualify you, that's okay. I'm not just going to say, sorry, can't help you, and you know, leave you be. I'm going to advise you on what you can do with your credit to improve your credit score to get you in a good position to be able to buy a house. And it might not be in a month, it might not be in 2 months, it might be 6 months to a year down the road. And as I'm going through that with you, if it's something that I think you might need a little bit of help with as far as your credit goes, I'm going to refer you to a credit repair company. And they are the experts as to what you need to do with your credit. When I refer you to them, they're gonna keep me in the loop, and they're gonna let me know when you are in a good position to be able to purchase that house. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. One of the biggest benefits of coming through somebody like me, so I'm Cleveland Mortgage, which is a broker, rather than going into a big bank. There's a couple differences. When you go into a big bank like US Bank or Huntington, they have their rates, their fees, and their programs, okay? My job, I have the ability to do all of the shopping for you. So I'm looking at a ton of different investors out there, which include those big banks because we do it on the wholesale side. And a lot of times my interest rates are better because we're sending them the business. Okay, so I'm doing all the shopping for you. I'm gonna find the best program and the best rate for you and your situation. Any questions? I know that's kind of a lot of information that we're throwing out there. But again, if you think of something, all of my information is in the folder. You can, my cell phone's in there. You're more than welcome to text, call, or email, and I'd be glad to talk to you.
Awesome.
Could you just rephrase that one more time as to why your percentages would be better than larger banks?
So because we work on the wholesale side, and so we are sending them tons and tons and tons of business. So they give us, I don't know if I should, yeah, kind of like, they're not giving us like a kickback, it's just a discounted, you know, interest rate, I guess you could say. It's just because we're sending them all kinds of business. And they want us to keep sending them business, so they're gonna give us some kind of benefit, you know, to keep doing that. That makes sense? Okay.
Great
Well, you're
information.
pre-qualified, how long does that pre-qualification stand for?
It's gonna be good for 90 to 120 days because that's how long your credit report is good for. When your credit report expires, then I need to do a new pre-approval. And I can do the pre-approval process in 1 day. I mean, it literally would take me about an hour from start to finish.
Well, for pre-approval, when I decide, well, I decide myself, well, now is not a good time for me to buy. But I still have this 120-day window, so I'll be coming back after the 120-day window to redo that pre-approval.
Yes, you would do the whole thing again. Now, I already have all of your information, so we don't have to go through the whole application again. I just need to recheck your credit and run it through the system to make sure that I still have that approval. Because interest rates change every day, you know, guidelines to certain programs change, so it's my job to know, you know, what's happening in the industry and what's gonna be best for you.
You made a good point. I want to piggyback. Are you good? I'm sorry.
I'm good,
Sorry.
unless there's any.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, what's the variable now? Do you have an average variable in terms of, say, for a couple of weeks, in terms of the interest rate? Does it swing greatly or is it tiny?
Yeah, so your interest rate is just kind of there until we have a signed purchase contract. When I have a signed purchase contract, that's my go-ahead to lock in your interest rate. Okay, before that happens, before I lock it in, the interest rate can change at any time. Now, you know, they've been very steady the last few months and at an ultimate low, so like right now is a good time. But, you know, I can't guarantee a rate until we have that signed purchase contract and we lock it in. And I'll usually lock it in for 45 days to 60 days, depending on the close date. And this is, the communication between the realtor and I is very important. We are in constant communication and working with each other so that everything is in place for you guys when you're ready. You're welcome.
You made a very good point, and I want to touch on this, and I'm glad you brought it up. You said, when is the best time for me individually? We get this question all the time from buyers and sellers, actually. But on the buy side, the $1 million question is, my gosh, Jeff, when is the best time for me to buy? Okay. Most people, and sometimes you think the data will tell you, well, when interest rates are really low, which it's part of that program as well, okay? Under the, when's the best time to do this? People think, well, I'm gonna just wait until it's a buyer's market, okay? And And just FYI right now, from today, going back about the last 4 years, we have been in a seller's market. And I'll get into that momentarily once I make my point on when's the best time to buy, okay? We are in a seller's market. We have more buyers right now because the rates are so low. I mean, you can't borrow money any cheaper on a home than you can right now. Who knows when they're gonna go up and when we'll see this again. We've been in a seller's market. We do not have enough inventory right now for all the buyers that we have. I mean, we're literally going, wanna sell your house? Got a buyer.
Wow.
Oh, it's been absolutely insane. Now,
That happened to me about 15 years. Me and my husband, we were just coming out of our house and a realtor called us and said,
Sure.
"Hey, do you want to sell?" And we were like, "Yeah."
yeah, ironically enough, you caught me on a good day.
You know, the same thing, I have Valley of the Trolley down my street on Sunday afternoons. After that program on Sunday morning.
Oh,
neighborhood.
yeah.
Hey, what you doing, say your house?
That's funny.
I have someone who likes his property. Just to fix it up for us.
Right.
And,
We have been in a crazy, crazy seller's market. Now, for us as agents, when we go to list and sell somebody's home, well, from that side of it, yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. We're dying for people to give us more properties to sell. But to your point, when is the best time to buy a home? Does anybody know the answer? I'm
When you're
hoping.
ready. When you're ready and financially able to do it.
I tell everybody when you're ready here, emotionally and financially. People get caught up in, well, when it's a buyer's market or where interest rates are low, and those things are applicable, but if you're not ready emotionally, psychologically, and financially, then it's not your time. And we're real huge in our group, going back to what Becky was talking about, educating people. We live in a time, as we all know now, where it is what it is. Everybody's impatient. Everybody wants an answer now. With technology, with our phones, with texting, it's instant gratification. Now, from a business standpoint, and I've been in business a long time, I was back in the day where you had to physically go in your office, listen to a voicemail on a landline, That's not that funny, is it? You've been there too.
I'm there.
So I've seen many of the swings. So now I guess my point is, not to get too far off, but one of my individual accolades with my own clientele is I could literally be sitting on my sofa late night, still up, watching TV, whatever, and clients have reached out to me 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then they're mind blown when I answer them, like right then and there. They'll give me the whole, "Oh my God, you didn't have to answer me till tomorrow." Sure, okay. But I did tonight, so do I get a little check mark there? Anyway, that's coming from a service standpoint. Every agent is different. There's a ton of realtors out there, ton of people doing what we do, because everybody thinks it's glamorous, everybody thinks we just live the best lives, we make a ton of money, we're always on vacation. Not true. The true agents that are really doing well, we work day and night. I'm on a roll of, I think, about 47 days straight of working to some capacity. It's a choice we make. It's like anything in life. If you want to be successful, be passionate, work hard, and do the right thing for your clientele. So from a service standpoint, so yes, you answered it correctly. It's when you're ready here, and your finances are where they need to be, both from a liquid cash standpoint and from a mortgage standpoint. Question.
Have you already said how you determine that you're financially ready?
In essence, you just missed Becky going over some
That's
mortgage stuff,
okay.
but that's okay.
I can talk to you at the end if you want.
We'll chat about that at the end. So where I want to segue into all of that next is, speaking of the financials, okay, because this is very big, is during the process, you will have some out-of-pocket expenses, okay? So if you want to write this down, what are my out-of-pocket expenses during the transaction? Okay, because not everything can be financed through Becky.
Mostly.
Mostly, but not all.
House inspection.
Okay. So your very first out-of-pocket expense, okay, is going to be
That lovely house inspection.
for your home inspection, okay? Now, state of Ohio law, I'm sure we've all heard of a home inspection. State of Ohio law does not say that you as the buyer must have one to complete the transaction. But why wouldn't you? You're spending all this money, okay? Why wouldn't you have a home inspection? The only small little times that we see a customer bypass that is that's more on our investor end of clientele, that they're paying cash for these properties. Most of the time they're gonna go in and rehab them anyway, so they're not concerned with that. But the average consumer is gonna get a home inspection. On a single family residence, whatever, 1,500 to 2,000 square foot home, it's gonna be on average of about $350, okay? That's gonna be your first cost. Now, how that works is this. Once we get a home inspector determined for your property, the agent, the client, the buyer, and the home inspector will go out to the property together. On a single family residence home, figure you're gonna be there probably about 2 to 3 hours, okay, for the process. You want to be there, you want the home inspector to educate you on what he or she is, finding. They're looking for major health and safety things. They're looking for all of your, your basic things to work, your electrical, your HVAC, your hot water tanks, all that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is you want to be there, you want to get educated, and when we write in our purchase contracts that our offer at $200,000 is contingent on a home inspection, okay? People love to ask us, well, is that kind of our way out of the deal in the event things don't go so well in the home inspection? The answer is yes, but you want to look at a home inspection as we're really looking for things that are detrimental to our health and safety. We're not looking at things that are cosmetics, okay? Cosmetics we can do ourselves or have somebody else do, i.e. paint, wallpaper, carpet, flooring, etc., okay? So, I'll give you a quick synopsis of how this works. The home inspection gets completed. You, the buyer, right then and there, cash, check, credit card, whatever, you pay the home inspector on the spot. Again, that has nothing to do with us agents. They're a third-party person. They have completed their task. They will email you a full report of that inspection pretty much upon completion. You will pay them. They are done and gone. The next step will be agents and buyer, we will get together and determine on that home inspection if there's anything that we want to go back to the seller and have them address. Home inspection, and the reason I talk about it first as an out-of-pocket expense, is because in the contract, once a contract is legally binding, meaning buyer and seller have agreed to all terms, conditions, and price, the home inspection, because it's contingent, because the deal is contingent on that home inspection, it is the very next step that we're gonna do within the first 7 to 10 days after we are under contract. And the reason it's the first and or next step that we do is because once that home inspection is complete, we are at that point back into a negotiation. In the event buyer and seller cannot agree on those things, and I'll explain a little bit more, then that's when we have to kind of go back to square one and see if we're gonna walk away from this home, and both parties have to agree to that. But the bottom line is, you wanna get that out of the way first, so you can move on to the next step, okay?
Can I chime in for a second?
Go ahead.
Just a question that always gets brought up to me when I'm going through the pre-approval process is a home inspection the same as an appraisal? What do you guys think?
No.
Two separate things. Yep, two totally separate things. The home inspection is on the real estate side. The appraisal comes in through the mortgage process. It's done after you have your purchase contract and you come to me and I'm processing the file. Okay, so the home inspection is exactly what Jeff said. An appraisal gives us the value of the house.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And I'll elaborate a little bit more on that question.
So the value of the house or the value of the house and its property?
They're gonna look at everything. So they will have the property, like how big it is, the whole thing, but mainly they're looking at the living space of the home.
And they're comparing it to other people in that area, the exact similarities to your home. So they can only compare, they can't compare it to this big mansion over here. They have to compare it to other homes that are within a certain radius of your home that has the same square footage, the same bedrooms, bathrooms, and if that home sold for $200,000 6 months ago, and then this home sold for $180,000, and they all are similar, then that's how they come up with the value of your home and an appraisal. So if home sales are really low, then that could affect your value, and then that would determine your loan to value and what you're approved for, and different things like that.
Very good, thanks ladies. So going back to, real quick, the home inspection gets completed. Now, the agents and the buyers, we sit down together and go through that inspection collectively, and we decide, do we want the seller to address anything? Do we want to, some buyers, depending on what the findings were of the home inspection, will simply say, you know what, Jeff, I'm not really worried about, there's some little punch list item things, I can take care of that stuff myself. Let's just keep this moving, okay? And in order to do that, we both parties, the seller side and the buyer side, we sign off on a documentation. Bear with us, we use a lot of acronyms in our business and we will explain them to you. An ROC, that is called a removal of contingency form, okay? So in the event we do want the seller to address some of those items that popped up on the home inspection, we spell those things out on the ROC form. We send it back to the listing agent who sits down with their seller. And at that point, we're now back into a negotiation because we're asking the seller to address 5 items. Now, what are the seller's options at that time? They can, A, address all 5 items. They can, B, address none of those items. Or sometimes the seller might say, you know what, let's keep this fair. I don't necessarily have the time or the money to do those 5 items. Why don't you, Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, come up with a figure that you guys feel is fair to cover those items, and we'll go ahead and give you a seller credit towards those items. Let me explain the 2 differences, because most people, when we talk about this, they go, oh yeah, that's when the seller, they just reduced the sale price by $1,000 or $2,000. It's 2 totally different things. We're not reducing the sale price. The seller says, I'll give you $1,000 credit towards your closing costs. Okay, remember that word from the beginning of this seminar? Okay, so that's another way to structure it, where they'll take $1,000, the seller, out of their proceeds of the sale of the home to cover those items that you asked for, and use it as a selling credit, which goes back to closing costs for the lender to do lender and title company jobs for them to get paid. We can structure it that way as well. Now, then the $1 million question becomes, well, what if buyer and seller, are at a stalemate and they can't agree? Seller doesn't want to give in, buyer's upset because, you won't address these items and I'm spending all this money for your house. What happens then? Not to bog you down with this too much, these scenarios do happen once in a while, but we like to point them out and educate everybody. If buyer and seller can't agree and we're stuck, the only thing we can do at that time, because we are under contract, is we sign what is called a mutual release. Meaning we're mutual releasing each other to get out of this contract, so the seller can go back on the market and sell it to somebody else, and buyer can go buy a different home, okay? Again, this doesn't happen that often, But in that scenario where buyer and seller can't agree on this whole home inspection part, then that's what has to happen, okay? Now here's the thing, if one party doesn't want to sign, a lot of times the seller might get upset and say, I'm not signing that form. Well, technically, legally, they can't put their property back on the market to sell it to somebody else because you are in a legally binding contract. And then the buyer technically can't go buy something else. So again, I'm not trying to bog you down with negative information, but those are things that pop up once in a while on a transaction, okay? Question?
Yes, I forgot my thought. If, well, it happened to a friend of mine, she and her husband were going to sell their house.
Uh-huh.
He got deployed,
Sure.
overseas, and in that deployment, he died.
Okay.
They went together to sell this house. Now, because of his death, rolls over on her
Correct.
to sell. Now, if they're, I don't know how you address that kind of problem, because they were going to use his military things to buy that home.
Sure.
That's one instance. And also, these are brick and mortar homes, first time homes, and not second homes or vacation homes or anything like that. It's a different process for that.
Correct. Correct. So this seminar, we're just basically talking about, the typical, single family residence that we're buying for ourselves. Investment properties, vacation all that kind of stuff, that's a whole different seminar.
I did put a flyer in your folder for investment stuff,
Oh,
so
wonderful.
there is some information in there on that, if you're interested.
So, home inspection is our first out-of-pocket expense, okay? I know there was a lot that went along with that, but again, we're very, very big on educating our clientele so you understand the entire process before we get to go out and do the fun part, which is looking at the houses. Everybody always wants to do that first, okay?
It's so beautiful.
It is the fun part.
It's the fun part.
It's the fun part.
The thing we do, we're so big on education, okay? What we don't like to do, and this is how other realtors lose their clientele. Trust me, when they come to me after that happens, I'm licking my chops. So I'm saying, you came to the right guy now. Here's the key to education. We don't ever like to we're looking at houses and all of a sudden we're full bore in the process and you're running after work every night at 5 p.m. to meet us at properties and we're getting into the process, then all of a sudden something awkward pops up or something to the likes of, well, you never told me that. Once all those things start happening, then we're losing each other, we're drifting apart, where we were bonded, now we're going this way, and all of a sudden, agents wonder why their clientele has no longer called them anymore because things got awkward, the agent wasn't working hard enough or communicative enough, they didn't educate them up front. I can't tell you how many realtors are out there that I'm amazed they don't do this process first. They'll just run out and start looking at houses with clients and they have skipped a million parts that you should have done up front. Because when you educate people, your clientele knows that you truly care about them, that we're in this together and we're gonna get across the finish line in a good, smooth manner. I'm not saying that the process doesn't have hurdles sometimes. Uncontrollables are uncontrollables, things happen. But especially for the first-time home buyer, we want to make this fun, exciting, as it should be, and really just do a good job to get you to the ultimate goal and get you across the finish line, okay? So your second out-of-pocket expense is going to be the cost of the appraisal, okay? There was a couple different ways that we used to collect monies for the appraisal, and I'm going to go back to Becky and have her explain how the appraisal, which the lender does, like she was saying earlier, that's all on the lender, it's still considered an out-of-pocket expense, but we've changed up a couple different methods of payment on the appraisal and the cost.
So, in my world on the mortgage side, I do not call it an out-of-pocket expense because when we're going through the process, we are rolling it into the loan amount, into your closing costs, okay? So it's not coming out of pocket at the beginning, But at the end, so when you purchase a home, you cannot roll in the closing costs. Okay, when you refinance, you can roll them in, but when you purchase, you cannot. So you're bringing the down payment and closing costs to the final closing table. When you're signing your final documents, that's when you're bringing your money in. So yes, it is an out of pocket, but it's not at the upfront out of pocket. Okay. The only time that you would be required to pay the appraisal ahead of time or something like that would be if for any reason the loan did not close, then you are still responsible to pay for the appraisal. Okay? At the beginning when we're doing it, my company covers the cost, and then we are reimbursed at the end when you bring in your final closing figure.
For many years, wasn't it, people used to either with a check or a credit card pay for it up front? Okay.
Yes, and some people still do that. Some lenders or banks might still do that. In my little world where I work, we do not do that.
And I guess that's where I've gotten used to calling it an out-of-pocket expense. Back when Becky and I learned mortgage together, God, 03, 04, 05, back in those days, a lot more lenders were taking that appraisal money before the deal even got across the finish line and collecting that up front.
Yeah.
And some still do, because again, it's the appraiser is just like the home inspector in the event. Those are third-party entities. The home inspector and the appraiser, not to be negative, but they're third parties. They're doing their jobs. They get paid. It's the end of the story. They're not really concerned. Not that they don't care, but they're not concerned if mortgage and realtors get their clients across the board or across the finish line. They're concerned with, I did my job, pay me, okay? So
They're about $450 to $500, a little bit more if it's a VA or an FHA. Sometimes an FHA is about $510, but yeah, you're looking right around that $450, $500 mark.
And you said inspections are about 300,
350.
350.
On average,
That's
yeah.
what so on average, okay.
On average, about $350 for a single family residence home. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So you basically going to find deal with at least $1,000.
We're almost there. Yeah, that number's real close. So yeah, good job on your math. We're almost there. So he made a very good point. So the last out-of-pocket expense, okay, is going to be, here we are with another acronym, EMC. That is an earnest money check. Anybody ever heard of it? Anybody know what that is? Anybody?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
An earnest money check is money in good faith. Okay? Once again, state of Ohio law does not require you to put an earnest money check down with the deal. However, buyers have gotten so used to it being part of the process, okay, that they just do it now. And I'll give you the dollar amount in a moment. And with this aggressive market that we're in, with all these sellers licking their chops, getting high, the high dollar for their home, and buyers literally, and not in all cases, but on a lot of homes, the ones that are done up right and priced right, I mean, we're getting into these bidding wars. Buyers are really trying to, jockey their position to get this house. So my point with that is this whole earnest money, when sellers are looking, especially at multiple offers that are coming in, and they're looking at price, the terms, the conditions, the earnest money checks, all of that stuff really plays a big role. So in the event you're purchasing a home, you want to have some extra money for that. So what is that cost? You see a lot of times for stuff in Cuyahoga County, they say typically it's 1% of whatever the sale price of the home is. However, the average earnest money check is going to be $500 or $1,000, okay? On average. We go up into some of our higher scale homes, some folks will write earnest money checks, and I'm talking about the stuff from $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 on up. You'll see bigger earnest money checks, but always figure about $1,000. Sometimes $500 is sufficient enough. to go ahead and submit. Now, when do you guys as the buyer cut that check? Okay, I've had literally people, we're looking at a home and they're like, this is the one. They're starting to cut a check and I'm like, slow down, hold on, we'll get there. Let's get the offer accepted first, because we have a promissory note as part of our documentation that we can submit. Once we get the offer submitted, then we will go ahead and write out the earnest money check, okay?
Can I chime in too?
Go ahead.
So so you're paying this earnest money at the beginning of the process. That earnest money comes off of the final closing number for you. So it's helping you in the end because you don't have to bring as much in. So if you do 500 or 1,000, that amount is coming off of the final number that I'm going to give you that you have to bring in to make the transaction complete.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That's a very good point, because people are like, oh, well, where's that money going? Like, I would love for you to make it out to Jay-Z, Jim Zeda, so I can go out and salsa dance, but, you know. The check will get made out to the title company. We will determine, again, that's part of a negotiation on the contract of what title company we're gonna use. So what we'll do is, we will inform our buyer, okay, we're under contract, yay, we've got a deal. You're gonna write a $1,000 earnest money check to Ohio Real Title. I always tell people in the memo part of the check, just put your property address and we keep everything moving, okay?
And your pre-approval comes in handy when you're writing that offer, because if there's multiple offers and you have a pre-approval and this person does not, that makes your offer 10 times stronger, because they know you already did the background work to make sure that you are financially ready to purchase their house. So again, if you have the pre-approval and this person doesn't, would you say 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10 they're gonna accept that one that has the pre-approval?
And most deals anymore, to be honest with you, sellers and listing agents are gonna laugh you out of the park if you submit an offer without any proof of financial, performance. So it's, if you're paying cash, go to your lender or go to your bank and get a proof of funds letter stating that you got the cash to perform on that. Majority of people are gonna go see Becky, get a pre-approval, and go from there. So, again, the two biggest things before you, again, do the fun part and go look at the houses is sit down, have this seminar, this one-on-one with your realtor, get a pre-approval. Now we've been educated, now we know what we qualify for, now we can go start looking at homes, okay?
And you can get your earnest money check back if the deal falls through.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Most of the time, yes. So what Rachel is referencing is that earnest money check, okay? She's going back to the part of after home inspection. If buyer and seller cannot agree, and we have to sign that mutual release form, and we've already turned in that earnest money check that went to the title company and it's sitting in that escrow account, a lot of buyers, just what she said, they'll go, oh my gosh, well, wait a minute. We gotta go back to the drawing board again. What about that $1,000 check that I wrote? Am I getting that back? The majority of the time, the state of Ohio does protect the buyer and will get that back to you. And you just start the process all over again. Not to bog you down too much with this, but again, both parties, the seller and the buyer, if you can't move forward, have to sign that mutual release in order for both parties to move on. And then within that mutual release, it will state down there's a little checkbox to say buyer to get their earnest money back. Very good point. Okay.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So let's just say you get a pre-approval of $300,000. When you go out to look for houses, should you look for houses less than 300 in case there's a bidding war?
It's gonna depend on where you're comfortable. So when I work with my clients, I talk a lot about the monthly payment and where you're comfortable, because just because I can approve you for $300,000 doesn't necessarily mean you should buy a $300,000 house.
Right, but I'm just saying, if you can't afford the 300,000, should you get less just in case
So
you're in that bidding war?
So what, here's what we'll do. I mean, if let's say 300 is the plateau, okay? What I'll do is I'll actually set you up in the MLS portal, and I'll talk about that too. We're gonna do a range for you. you know, part of it'll be what Becky is saying. If I approved you for 300, okay, once we say you're maxed approved at 300, then the loan officer's job is to always go back and say, okay, great, you're approved for that. However, let's talk about your comfort range, PI, TI, and or MI. Once you've got that number figured out, then she can go back and say, well, based on what you're comfortable with all your other bills and everything else you got going on, because we never want anybody to live house poor. It's not fun anymore. Just to try to compete with yourself. It's not. It's just not fun. Then it doesn't become fun anymore.
I understand what you're saying though. I think we're talking about two different things here. So I think what she's saying is, okay, yeah, I'm approved for 300,000 and I'm comfortable at that 300,000. Should we look at houses that are a little bit less so that if I do get in a bidding war, I can go up to that 300,000? Like she can go over the purchase price. Is that what you're asking?
That's what I was
Okay.
asking.
And then normally with you, with Becky, she would let me know, like, they're approved at 300, but there is some wiggle room. She possibly could go up to 305, or maybe you can ask for some concessions that can help offset that price.
Yeah, and that's where our close contact comes in because I also have that flexible schedule, so I know you guys are out there looking at houses after work, okay? And I'm already at home feeding my kids dinner or something, right? But if Rachel calls me and says, I think this might be the house, there's gonna be multiple offers, where are we? She will give me the address, I'll put all the information in, I'll look at the taxes, I'll look at the interest rates that day, and then I will call you and go over the numbers so that you can decide if you wanna go to your max, if you wanna go a little bit above because you like just have to have this house. So we're always in constant contact. You're not gonna be putting in an offer when you don't know exactly what those numbers are. Is that helpful?
Yes.
And then also in the 300,000 range, let's say that was your range, okay? What we'll do in the MLS, when you're getting emails that are coming through of homes that meet all your criteria in your price range, what I'd like to do, if somebody's at 300, I'm gonna set it up where I'm gonna send you stuff that's, let's say maybe 275, 280, 300, and then maybe up to like 310, just to give a nice little range. So I'm not just sending you stuff just at 300,000, because we'll be limited if we just, limit it to stuff that's 300,000, especially with our low inventory that we've been experiencing over the last 4 or 5 years, yes.
This is for houses that are already standing.
Correct.
So if you're building a home,
Okay.
then is it the same type of process?
New construction is a completely different process. And we have, there are times where realtors work in conjunction with builders. For example, Pulte, Drees, Cahoe, I mean, there's a ton of them out there. Everybody knows Ryan Homes. They do a lot of business all throughout our communities. There's custom builders out there. Completely different process. That process, and there's times where we have buyers, we'll represent them, okay, and bring them to a builder, and I kind of say help babysit and monitor the process, because your average new construction build is going to be on average of about 6 months. Your financing, okay, you guys do new construction? So
we do new construction, so it's two different things.
Completely.
If you're doing like a Ryan Homes or something like that, the process on my side is just the same, because Ryan Homes pays for everything at the beginning when they're building the house, and then I treat it just as a normal transaction. So it's not really any different on my side. Now, say you're completely building it on your own with your own contractors or whatever, all that stuff, that's a completely different animal.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Good question. Anybody else? We're throwing a lot at you. This stuff. Yes, Doug.
When you talk about shortages of
Okay.
properties, is that countrywide? Is it regional?
It has been. I mean, we've done studies. Inventory, inventory's been low, yes, for the most part, nationwide. Everybody's kind of experiencing the same type of drought, if you will. Our thought process is, well, my gosh, doesn't everybody know about that right now? Wouldn't, sellers want to just sell their house because they can get a really good dollar amount for it, et cetera, et cetera. We think that way, but the bottom line is, you have to have some type of motivation to want to sell. Most people aren't going to say, oh, well, sure, yeah, I'll sell my house just because I can get a good number for it, and then then go where and do what. You know, there's always a plan behind everything, but yes, it's pretty much nationwide. Everybody's going through the same thing. So, I mean, we repeat ourselves over and over again. You know, I know it's not applicable to this group, but on the seller side, we're like, my gosh, people, come on, you want to sell your home? We've got 5 buyers waiting for you. Go ahead.
Now, on the other end of that, when I go to certain sites and I see the home for the 4th month or 5th month in a row, are those the people who refuse to bring their price down, or are they being unrealistic?
I'm gonna go into that in a minute. I'm gonna go into that. Go ahead.
Actually, with Keller Williams
Uh-huh.
home in my neighborhood, I think it had 2 open houses, and then it went to sale pending. I think it was estimating 2 to 3 weeks at least, but I was surprised that it was taking so long because the sale happened, it could have happened within literally a week. So that part of the question is, what's the typical wait period for the pending sale to be actuated? And then my other question is, I actually got a real estate license years ago. But what it did, it gave me the opportunity to sightsee
Sure.
and find my house
Okay.
via the homes being on the market. So my question in that regard is, it took me so long to find something.
That happens.
Then do you, again, this is too many years past,
It's okay.
do you write that into the sale, the purchase, that seller has 4 months to find?
Okay.
So, a couple questions.
I'll answer all those. I'll go with yours first. So, when we're working with a seller, okay, the number one toughest conversation sometimes to have is, what is my home worth? Okay? And the number one reason, especially what you're saying in this market, why would a home sit so long if you're telling me inventory's low, there's a ton of buyers, interest rates are great, everybody wants to buy a home. So the number one reason a home sits on the market too long is because it's overpriced for what the market is going to bear, okay? That's number one. And trust me, you all will do it. Everybody does it. If they've got their mind, meaning a buyer, on a specific house, they're watching that thing every single second of the day. We already know. I get my clients texting me all day long or whatever. Oh my God, did you see? Did you see? Right. Okay? And here's the problem with that. The human element in us tells us nothing about the price. The human element tells us we're watching this thing every day. It hasn't sold. It hasn't sold. What's the number one thing we start to think in our minds when it hasn't sold?
What's
No,
wrong?
I'm like, I'm about to get some cash. I'm knocking on the door. You don't take it off and it's not too high.
All right.
That's what I'm thinking.
We tend to create and think in our minds, well, something's got to be wrong with it. And that's most of the time that's not the case. It's, you know, we bring factual data to our sellers. We have conversations, we bring data, we try to come to, you know, this thing with what are we going to list it for. I always tell sellers, you know, the thing is, we've done studies on this, speaking of more data, nationwide, this, that, and the other. In the Midwest, when we sell, on average, we tend to list it about 10 to 12% over of what it's probably going to sell for. Why? Because we create in our minds, oh my God, I have to leave room for negotiation. I have to be able to work something. I've had sellers recently that have gone on the Jay-Z program and listened and priced it to sell. What happens when you price it to sell? Not only is it probably going to go under contract within 24 hours, but that's when you get into people then sometimes wanting to go to a bidding war and maybe then overpay for it. Okay? Now what I mean by it, keep in mind though, that all sounds fine and dandy, okay? The number one thing as a seller, and I'm not trying to get too bogged down on that side of this process because we're in a home buying seminar, but the seller, the number one thing you want to accomplish as a seller, yes, I know we're looking for the highest number and all that, but really the number one thing you want to accomplish if you're selling, because one of these days you'll get to sell in your home too. Remember this, it's all about how fast I can sell it. And I'm not saying you're gonna give it away, okay? Anybody can just give away their home, and of course we would never encourage that. But you want to get it up and off ASAP. That becomes a win-win for everybody. Go ahead.
My husband and I were looking for, when we were looking for a home to buy, and we were up in the Wade Park area.
Sure.
And we watched this house literally, we taken apart, then come back together. Cleveland Clinic just sucked up all of the property around there, and just like overnight, not even just like overnight. And
it's called uncontrollable.
so there has to be so we were talking to ourselves, is there an agent that handles just those properties that are up around University, well, we're in University Circle now, up around Wade Park, or those that are around the clinic, those there, because they're, it seems to come up and down in a matter of hours.
Yeah, some agents may be in cahoots with those organizations to get kind of an inside scoop on that stuff, you know, to be able to position themselves properly, to get in on that whole kind of game, if you will. Do we specifically? No, we're not involved with that, but I know exactly what you're referencing. It's amazing. I will tell you, almost 20 years of mortgage and real estate. I've had an opportunity to live in a few different states, this, that, and the other. Cleveland, I've said it for, 10 years now. We're really trying. We're really turning that corner slowly but surely, and it's good for Cleveland. It's great for Cleveland. We're becoming like the next little mini Chicago, if you will. We're trying with more jobs and more industry and restaurants and all of the stuff that we have to offer. Believe it or not, people are moving to Cleveland. It's amazing. I mean, most of us are from here, so we just, you know, we're natives, but it's really good to see people coming in from different coastal areas and saying, yeah, you know, I know your winters aren't that great, but you know, your cost of living and what you offer. So that's another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is get your properties, you know, we're Cleveland's on the map officially. So going back to, let's talk about, so we've got out-of-pocket expenses covered, websites. I want to talk about this a little bit. The human element in us, once again, when we're searching for homes, we are all going to, on our own, now keep in mind, realtors, we set you up in a portal called the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service. It is the granddaddy of all search engines. The reason why is it's actually, the cost just went up on that, just FYI. It can only be accessed by agents unless we set you up with it, okay, with the portal. It's very expensive for us. It's part of our cost, I should say, as agents. It is our bloodline. We cannot do our job, or I like to say our career, without it, okay? It is monitored very closely for accuracy. Meaning that when we go, and I'm going to answer the second part of your question in a moment as far as, I'm going to segue into your second part. So the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service, is our search engine where new properties constantly go on the market every day, every hour, every minute. Some will stay there for days or months on end, things of that nature. Now, we will set you up with a portal based on your criteria. What you're looking for, what areas, bedrooms, bathrooms, all of that, basements, garages, etc. We'll do all that homework with you, and then we'll set you up on that MLS portal. Now, the human element in you is going to say, okay, I love the MLS that my agent set me up with, but I'm going to go to Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, Redfin, etc. I'm fine with my clients doing that. Okay? I will tell you this, I am not one to ever down anybody's business, but just keep in mind, Zillow. I get it, they do great marketing. In America, who does the best marketing usually wins. It's just how we are. It is what it is. They have gotten so big that their problem is now they can't keep up with the data. Meaning, I've had tons of my clients get excited. Oh my God, Jeff, I saw the one. I saw it in Zillow. Okay?
That is so.
6 months ago. We're like, come on now. So my point is this. All the search engines, they're only as good as the people entering and deleting the data. The market's been so crazy that keeping up with that data, I get it, it's tough.
With those sites,
Okay.
can you say that certain sellers only have their homes listed with the MLS and they can say, I don't want my homes listed in all of these aggregate sites? Is that an option?
They do have that option.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, I'm sorry.
Because that material, I mean, that's still specific to the seller. So, you know, when we meet with a seller, they know it's going into the MLS, which is, you know, the end all of all search engines. But yes, there's a way to filter that out if you don't want it to be seen on other sites.
And the other question that I'm asking because I've been looking at properties in other states.
Okay.
I'm seeing this virtual staging.
Sure.
Right? And like,
Yeah.
is that legal? Are they supposed to have a disclaimer? How do you know what you're really seeing?
So great question. What she's referencing is virtual staging. So when you go into any one of these portals, and let's say the house is already vacant, okay? We do have data and software that can actually stage as if furniture is in there, okay? So is that what you're referencing?
Exactly.
Okay. So the question she's asking is that legal, okay? It is legal if the agent has had the conversation with the seller and the seller says, yes, you may go ahead, even though I've moved out, my house is vacant, but you can use your software to virtually stage it. It's all about getting the permission from the seller or a buyer if it's something on the buyer end, okay? So yes, it's legal if you have permission from the seller.
Because my question is it representative of the finishes and the because that software makes a home look really good.
Sure.
Is that what it looks like?
So it's not
just the furniture.
Not right.
I mean, you have photographers who can do that and just make the home just look great. And
Those presentations.
nothing like everything.
Most of the time in that scenario, it's really more about kind of staging where furniture and stuff is going to go, more so than the actual, is that the cabinetry, is that the granite countertops, is that, it's more just kind of giving you a visual idea of how things are going to fit, not necessarily representing the finishes of the home, okay? Because what Rachel just said is if, you know, you're going into a home and it's vacant and it's empty, well, sure, it's still most likely going to have appliances and of course countertops and cabinets and all of that, the actual, you know, shell of everything. So that can be, you know, I mean, that just goes with the regular photos, but the virtual staging and all that, that's more for just placement of furniture to get an idea of room sizes and
I
how
don't
things
know
are
what's
going to
real. See, that's why you gotta work with a realtor because I don't know if this is real.
And they really do make it
Yeah.
really, really good.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and just like what you just said, also, there will be a lot of times when we'll go into a house together, this happens more than not, where you'll see the photos on the website, and then you get to the house, and you're like, I got duped. It happens, but sometimes it could be the opposite. Sometimes you get into the house, and it looks even better in person than it did in the photos. But typically, it's the other way around sometimes.
And just to piggyback on
Yeah.
this, she was looking at places that were not in this area.
Right.
of the state,
Yeah, not in this.
And we did the same thing, looking at out of state. With an in-state, in Ohio, in-state Ohio realtor handle an out-of-state property.
Okay, great question. So, state to state, we are Ohio licensed agents. We can only practice Ohio real estate, period. If we wanted, we do get opportunities, let's say like a Delaney situation, where we're selling her home here, but she's moving out of state, okay? If I wanted to help her buy a house in that other state, I would have to be licensed in that state. However, we can help her sell her home here, and as long as we have the data and all of that, which we would before she moved, there's opportunities for us as agents based on relationships that we've made in other states, where we can refer out an agent. But we can't specifically cross state of Ohio lines and go practice real estate in another state, no.
Was that a realtor from Florida to contact me here in Ohio?
Sure.
Because those people want to move back, but they want to move back in Royceville District.
Sure.
So how do you do that?
I do a lot of, myself personally, I've lived in Arizona, Florida, and Chicago, so I know agents in other areas that I've built relationships with. There's a lot of referrals that I give to certain Florida agents that I've made contacts with. I just simply refer it out, they handle it from there, and then we work out whatever, percentages or whatever, commissions that we work out on the, not on the side, but it's done legally, but yeah. So we refer from state to state, yes. But we can't actually practice in that other state unless we were licensed. There are some agents that are duly licensed, that have Ohio licenses and Florida licenses. I actually almost started to do that myself. It would take a lot though to service both, unless you're call it a snowbird or whatever. If I wanted to spend 6 months in Florida and 6 months in Cleveland, as opposed to trying to service clients in Florida and flying back and forth every week, that would just be chaotic. But so yes, so we refer out in those situations most of the time. We'll know ahead of time and then set the client up properly for that, okay? So we talked about websites. Moral of the story is, even though we've got you set up with the MLS, we know that the human element in you is gonna go to those other websites. We're fine with that. Just remember, and I'm not discouraging you even to going to Zillow. You're gonna go there anyway. It's fine. It's just gonna happen. Again, he who does the best marketing creates the perception that I'm the best. So just do us a favor. Any websites that you go to, you get real excited about a property, email it to us first. Let us check the validity of it in the MLS. We go to the MLS, we are looking for it to still be in an active status, okay? I'm gonna talk to you about statuses in a moment here. We'll check to see if it's in an active status. If it is, for the most part, we should be good to go to be able to still show you the home. Speaking of statuses, in this crazy market that we are in, again, you buyers watch this like a hawk on a daily basis. You were asking about statuses. Homes go from an active status to a contingent status once buyer and seller have agreed on price, terms, and conditions. Then you see the letter C, contingent. What is that contingent mostly on? The part we talked about at the beginning, home inspection and appraisal. Okay? So now the property is under contract, nobody else can buy it. We are looking to go from a contingent status, once we've gotten past home inspection, buyer and seller agreed, signed off on that ROC, we keep this moving. The next step will be the appraisal. From Becky's company, they get the appraisal, they determine the value of the home. Once it has gotten past that process, that's when you see the letter P for pending. So what that means is once it's in pending, that's when you know it's getting to its closer to its final stages of crossing the finish line, okay? We have a lot of people, because again, if you don't do this all day, every day, you don't know what you don't know. I have millions of customers that said to me, my buyers, they panic. They're watching it every day. Oh my God, why is it still showing an active status? I thought I bought it. You bought it. You're under contract. You gotta remember, there's processes to everything. So our administrative staff internally, by the time they get documents to lenders, title companies, it could take another day or so before they're able to go into the MLS and move that status over, okay? But once it gets to pending, that means it's on its final stage. Because also, people get nervous, they'll say, why is that real estate sign still in the yard? I thought we were under contract. I thought the sign's coming out. It's okay. We don't go and yank the sign on the seller side right away once we've gotten under contract. We like to wait a little bit, okay, till at least we got past home inspection, because remember, that's always our first step. What happens if we yank the sign and we have to go back on the market again because we couldn't agree? So now we gotta go back out and put the sign back out. So we leave it out there for a little while, get through our little steps, and typically we're gonna go pick up the sign and the lockbox on the seller's home, basically when the transaction has crossed the finish line, okay? Because then we know we're clean slate, everybody's good to go. Do yourself one favor, and Becky and I haven't even brought this up yet. This is our number one thing throughout the entire buying process, okay? And she even puts it in her packet or her email. Do not, we can't repeat this enough, do not make any major purchases on credit. Do not buy appliances. I know you're excited to run out to Home Depot and get those stainless steel appliances. Do not go and buy a vehicle right before you're getting ready to close on a house. Keep your financial purchases very limited. I'm not saying you gotta eat cereal and ramen noodles every night, but just keep it simple, okay? Do not make any major purchases. Keep doing the best that you can throughout the process to put as much money in that checking account and just keep everything clean. But no major purchases during this, because this is your major purchase.
Why not, Jeff?
Okay.
But they are watching you like a hawk.
Do you know why you shouldn't do that? Anybody know why?
Does it impact your credit or your,
It
what you can
can.
afford, your debt to
So,
income ratio?
Yes.
That's the
On my
big one.
side, I'm going to be looking at that debt to income ratio from the very first time I talk to you. Right before you sign your closing papers, they will do a credit check
Again.
to make sure that you didn't go out and buy a new car or this or that, because if you buy something, I have to put that in your liabilities. And if you go above the qualifying guidelines for your debt to income ratio right before you're ready to sign, I can't do the deal. So if you're real tight with your debt to income ratio, it is so important, and it has happened before.
Oh, yeah.
It
But
has
just
happened.
simply getting your credit ran, say you don't even get anything, just simply going out and getting it checked is gonna lower your credit score, which can put you out of qualifying, because maybe you needed that 640 middle score, and now you're at 630 because you had your credit ran so many times.
See, you need your credit, check,
Checked.
just to see if you can afford the house, or just to see if you can, or where you stand, period.
So I'm saying that if you go and you're in Victoria's Secret, just buying you some new yoga pants, and they say, hey, you wanna save 25%?
No.
And say you decide, oh, I'll save 25%, and you apply for the Victoria's Secret card, then your score's gonna go down 35 points. That can make or break being a
It
friend.
really can.
Yeah.
That happened to me, and I said no, but they had done it anyway, unbeknownst to me.
Man.
I don't know how it happens because I didn't have to give my
No social or anything.
social or
That's weird,
nothing.
yeah. Wow.
And they actually did, I think it was a scam, but they had done it and actually someone bought a coat.
Wow.
So that one question at checkout,
Yeah.
and sometimes you have to hit, you have to hit the LCD screen.
Yes.
So I think that's like, you've got to be really careful, even when you're not even intending to say you want this.
Correct.
Stay out the mall. I mean, the home buying process is literally like 30 to 45 days. Just know,
Correct.
during that process, you're not doing
Don't do
anything.
anything.
You're not spending up your money in cash, because
Nope.
you need that in the bank,
Yep.
because they want bank statements, they want your tax returns. I mean, they want to see everything that you're doing, because this is a huge purchase that they're funding for you, and they need to make sure that you're capable.
of the biggest purchases of your life.
Yes, literally.
On the
Yeah.
credit card there that, we first bought this house, we paid all the bills, paid it off of everything. Then the credit people came back and said, "No, you don't have enough debt, or you don't have the right kind of debt." So that was the whole point of paying off everybody.
I know, this is why I'm gonna go up next.
The whole point of paying off all is getting rid of that debt, so that now you are worthy of taking on, a different kind of house. You know, you shouldn't have paid off everybody.
Right.
You shouldn't have, no debt.
And your credit, it has a big impact on what you can qualify for, has a big impact on what your interest rate's going to be. So it's really, really important when she gets up here to really pay attention and so you know when you're looking at your credit report, what you're looking at, what needs to be done or whatever. And like I said, if you go through the pre-approval process and for whatever reason, because of your credit, I can't get you approved, we're not just gonna say, sorry, we can't help you, see you later. We're gonna advise you, we're gonna help you through that. We're really gonna work with a credit repair company to get you, where you need to be in a good position to be able to purchase the house.
But there's no debt to repair.
Well, we'll get into that momentarily. We're gonna talk about that next. So, on the real estate side, go ahead.
It's your expertise.
Yeah.
What happens if that appraisal
Uh-huh.
doesn't match?
Okay.
Good question.
The question is, we all agreed, seller and buyer, to buy this $300,000 house, okay? The question is, great question. If we all agreed, 300,000, both buyer and seller, that's our number, we're under contract, we get through the home inspection, we're good to go, it's appraisal time, and that appraisal comes back, we all agree to 300, but it only appraised for 290, okay? Uh-oh, we've got a problem here. So now what do we do? Well, we all agreed to 300, the lender says it's only worth 290,
I can't lend more than what it appraises for.
so now we have a 10K discrepancy. So typically, the most logical thing would be, we have to, on the buy side, we have to go back to the listing agent so they can review with their seller, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the house only appraised for 290. But we said 300,000. I understand what we all agreed upon on paper, but the lender is saying it's only worth 290. And like Becky just said, they're not gonna lend you more money than what the house appraised for. So in that situation, here we are back to a negotiation. We've got a $10,000 discrepancy. We're gonna go back to the seller and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we still love the house, we wanna move forward, but we're only gonna pay $290. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you have to drop your sale price by $10,000 to keep this moving. What is the seller's option at that time?
Yes or no?
Basically, a lot of times they get upset, and I get it. They're like, wow, that's, get a different lender. That appraiser doesn't know what they're talking about, blah, blah, blah. All in all, it's a negotiation. Most of the time, the seller will be like, all right, fine. They're not happy about it, but they gotta keep this process moving. So they'll reduce the sale price by 10K. The only other option that we've seen, we don't encourage our buyers to do it because, let me just say it this way. The only other option is the buyer can come out of pocket that additional 10K. But why would you do that?
Right.
Then now you're in a $10,000 negative equitable situation right off the bat. The only time I've had two buyers do it over a period of time with me, and these are people that they just love the home so much and had that kind of liquid cash in their bank account to be able to make up that difference. Most of us aren't gonna have that kind of money, nor are we gonna encourage you to pay more for what the house is worth. Don't get me wrong. I always tell every buyer, it's your hard-earned money. We are here to work for you, and we will follow your instructions. I had those two clients, and I mean, again, that's at a different kind of money level, where they're just like, whatever, 10K with them, like, okay. So if you got it like that and you wanna do it, okay, however, we don't encourage that. But that's typically how that scenario goes. Great question. Anybody else? Realtor questions, do you wanna add anything, Rachel? You good? So what I'm gonna do is typically at this point, is where I go into now, putting it back onto my buyers. We're not gonna do it today because none of you guys are our buyers, but this is where I go into the fun part, and you guys now get to tell me what areas you're looking for, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, garages, blah, 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 blah. We go through all that data, and then I get you set up with the MLS portal. But if that's good for now, we'll turn it over to Raquel and school us on how to get our credit right. Great.
So I'm Raquel Robinson, and I am the owner of Royal Financial Services, which is a credit research company here in Cleveland, Ohio. We are one of the only licensed African-American credit research in Ohio. And I have a little bit of background. I used to be a mortgage loan officer years ago. So I do understand that process. I am a homeowner myself, over 10 years now. So I've been through the home buying process. I know what it's like to have to replace your roof, your furnace, your hot water tank. I mean, literally. So definitely you want to be financially ready, because it is it's a major purchase. And you don't have a landlord that you're going to come to help. It's all on you. So you do need to be financially ready. And one of the biggest pieces, no matter what they are talking about, they can't even assist you until your credit is in order. So that's what I would like to talk about. So give me a moment to pull this up here. And then we can.
Could you just talk a little louder?
Yes, absolutely.
And what is your company's name again, please?
Royal Financial Services. And I can provide you guys with some cards and everything. So, credit is a huge piece, so I wanna make sure everyone can hear me, into any purchase actually. I mean, cause it literally determines what type of car, what neighborhood you're gonna live in, even if you can get a cell phone. I mean, they are going to pull your credit for all of these things. So, I just wanna briefly go over, let's talk about getting your credit on track. And so, what is credit? Does anybody can anyone even really tell me what they know about credit?
Ability to make a purchase.
Okay, good. Anybody else? You don't really, you know?
I understand that's basically work, but essentially,
Yes,
money doesn't absolutely mean anything because
no, that's absolutely right. I mean, literally, we live in a credit society. Credit reigns. Majority of the people that are going to purchase a home are not purchasing with cash unless it's some type of investment. So, most of the time, you want to use up all of your capital, your liquid cash anyway, on a major purchase when you can make payments over time. So credit is your financial power. It helps you get the things you need now, like a loan for a car or a credit card, based on your promise to pay later. And working to improve your credit helps ensure you'll qualify for loans when you need them. And so, just going over, why is credit important? The reason why it is so important and why you want to strive to make sure you're doing everything you possibly can to have a healthy credit score is because it will not only affect you being able to qualify for items, to be able to pay for them over time, it determines what interest rate you pay. So yeah, you might be able to get approved for the loan, but you don't want to have a car and you're paying 20-something%. I literally see that. When I work with different clients, they are over their heads in an upside down loan on a car paying 20-something% because they were in such bad financial state that the company's like, hey, we'll give you a loan, but you're such a high risk. You're gonna have to pay. Extra, you already don't have the money to pay. Even if you're going to rent a property, they pull your credit for you to rent somewhere. What do? They make you pay deposit, first month's, last month, you already can't afford to move, and you have to come up with 3 times the rent just to be able to get into the apartment that you're trying to get in, all because of your credit. So you actually pay way more money having bad credit, which is a lot of times the people who don't have any money compared to the people who do have money, they pay so much more or less. So it's just, I mean, literally, it is the lifeline of everything that you do. So it is very important that you, and then if you do have blemishes on your credit, they can be on there for up to 7 years. So that's a long time to be in that cycle of having to pay those type of high interest rates and coming up with extra money that you technically, even if you did have it, why would you just want to throw it away?
Mhm.
So that's why credit is very important. And so I just want to go to just breaking down the FICO chart and what it actually, what makes up your credit score. And so there are 5 components to what makes up your credit score. The highest credit score that you can get is 850 points. So when we think about that, payment history is the biggest piece of our credit score. And what is payment history? Can you pay on time? So of course that's gonna be the biggest piece, because they wanna know, can you pay? So if there's 550 points. If you had no score technically in the background, you're starting off with 300 points. And then you have 550 points that you can earn to generate your score up to 850 points. So payment history is 35% of your score. There is literally 192 points that you can earn just by simply paying your bills on time. That means you're never late. You get 100% payment history, you're gonna automatically get 192 points. So that's gonna take you up to 492. You still got a terrible score. You get a 400. And that's if you pay your bills on time, because you also have to do other things. So when we get to the utilization category, which is 30% of your score, you can earn 165 points. There is what we call revolving credit and installment credit. Revolving credit is some type of credit card. You cannot, it's literally almost like impossible for you to not have a good credit score without a credit card. You actually need to have, and I'm trying to say you have to be in debt. You do not, that's what people, so when you posed that question earlier, you paid off all of your debt. It's okay to not be in debt. You still need to have those accounts. That's where people make their mistake. They go and close everything. Because at the end of the day, the only way the algorithm can score you, they have to see how you manage the credit that you do have. That doesn't mean you have to be in debt. You could, every once in a while, use the card, pay it off, but you still need to have it on your profile. Otherwise, the algorithm has nothing to score. So then, what are they gonna score? So your utilization is 30% of your score, so it's really not taking into account your installments, which is your same payment like a car note or a mortgage note. That payment never changes. It's the same over time. And so when we're thinking about a credit card, you always want to have a low utilization. You want to be kind of conservative. Not to say you can't use your credit cards, but when you do use them, typically when you see online, they say keep your credit cards at 30%. You really should keep it below that, because you would never, if you kept all of your credit cards at 30% of the limit, you would never earn 165 points in that category. It needs to be between 1 and 10%.
So the higher, if you have $1,000 max on your credit card and you're up at $850 used on it and you only got 150 left, that's bringing down the score?
You're losing points.
You're losing points. Now what happens if you're somebody that racks it up, okay, but you pay it off every month?
So
does that help?
So this is the thing, and I put it in the next seminar, but
Okay.
this is the biggest piece why so many people don't understand credit, because nobody really tells us this information. The due date is not the most important date. Your statement date is the most important date on your credit card, because your due date determines how much interest you pay. So say you run your credit card up to $1,000, by the due date, you pay that $1,000
Right.
off in full.
Okay.
That means you pay no interest. But 3 to 5 days after the due date, it's your statement date. So say you then run that card back up.
Right.
2 days later, your statement date is the 5th, you paid your card off on the 2nd,
Right.
that's what's gonna report to the credit bureaus.
Okay.
And so at that time, that is what is gonna determine what your utilization is.
The question
I'm
is,
sorry.
that's okay.
I missed that. You said the statement date is what?
Your
gets
statement
reported?
date is the most important date. You can never pay nothing by the due date every single month.
I always do that.
See, this is why this is good.
And your credit score is probably terrible because of that. Because they do not report,
So your
what you
statement-
paid on the due date. The credit bureaus never saw that, because you can literally never pay at the due date, every single month. They can't report you late until you're 30 days late, so it'll never report that you're late. And what they're gonna report is what was your balance on that statement date. That is literally the most important thing credit affecting, and most people do not know that. Because they're like, I pay my bills on time every month, it has nothing to do with that.
So basically, you're telling me if I have $1,000, limit, just use 100.
So it's not that you should only use 100, you can use $1,000, but at that statement date, it needs to be under 10%. At that statement date, and
That's how
then you
it
can
affects
go
the
the
credit
next
rating.
day
Yeah.
and run it up, they'll never see that part. You see what I'm saying? You have to use it after the statement date. So by the statement date, if your statement date is the 14th, they're gonna say, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, this is what their balance is on this date. And then throughout the rest of the 30 days, they'll never know what you're doing during that time.
It's been bamboozled, I'll tell you.
Yep. But the due date is strictly for interest purposes only. So you can not pay it on the due date, and they give you a little $29 late fee, and you can say, oh, I'm so sorry, I paid it 2 days later, can you waive that? They'll waive it, but it does not matter. That is, the statement date is literally the most important thing credit-wise. And so 30% is what typically they say to keep your credit cards at, but really 1 to 10% is normally the sweet spot. That's where you're gonna earn the 165 points. Then we have age, and that accounts for 15% of your score, and you can earn 82.5 points in that category. And so the only way to get age is pretty much you have to manage credit over time. So as your file ages, you'll gain more and more points. That's why it's important, and that's why credit cards is the most important thing on your credit profile, because as long as you manage them responsibly and properly, they'll stay open forever. Whereas a mortgage, you can eventually pay it off. A car, you'll eventually pay it off, and then it'll close. Even though it closes, as long as it was positive that whole entire time, the duration of your loan, it'll stay on your profile for 10 years. If it was negative, it'll stay on your profile for 7 years, because negative activity can't be held against you for longer than 7 years. So you'll still get points in the history category. However, it's best to have some type of credit that you can keep over time to continuously gain in the age category. Then, of course, we have the credit mix, which is another reason why people, it's only 55 points, however, they want to see how can you manage a variety of credit over a variety of credit. Your average consumer has a home, has a car, has a student loan, has a personal loan, has a couple credit cards. So that would make up your credit mix. Your mix needs to consist of all of those items. You will never fully get the 55 points if you never buy a home, because they want to see that real estate that gives it the strongest on a credit profile. Not to say that you can't get a nice score, but you'll never fully get that full. You'll always see that as a risk factor. Oh, no real estate on the profile, because they want to see, can you manage your home? Can you manage your car? Can you manage credit cards, a personal loan, they wanna see that variety because your average person really actually does have all of those items. It doesn't matter what ethnic background, I mean, typically, your average person is working every day, they do have a variety of all those items.
If you pay off your home and pay off your car, then you just too bad.
So, I mean, say you never. So, this is the thing, and this is why we help provide our clients with credit building tools. You cannot have a car and still get some type of credit building tool to give you an installment account, like a self-lender account, or something like that, where it'll give you that mix that you're missing on your credit profile. And it's just literally a savings account where you're just paying yourself and it's reporting to the all three credit bureaus. So something like that. You do not necessarily, so you don't have to have it, but you'll never get the full, you'll never hit 850. Put it like that. If you don't have all of those items. You'll still have a good credit score, but you'll just never hit the top if you don't have all of those items. So it's not that you won't get approved for the things that you want. You can still get a good profile without having a home and without having a car, but you do need some other forms of credit. They still need to see how you manage those items.
It looks like this is designed to keep them in debt.
Yeah. But you don't have to be in debt. You don't necessarily have to be in debt.
So when you talk about having a credit card, that also means actually using it. So, you know, and not the 30%, but stay within that 10%. So using it, you've got to do that. You can't just hold it.
Right. That's absolutely right, because they will close your card due to inactivity. And you see that all the time on people's profile. It's closed due to inactivity. And why do they really do that? Because they're not making any money off of you. Even if you paid your card off by the due date every single month, you never pay interest. When you go to swipe your card, the merchant has to pay merchant fees. So they don't want to have this capital sitting out in the world with you, just wasting, not using their money. If they're not gonna make money on interest on you, they wanna make money through the merchant fees that they collect from you swiping your card. So if you don't use it, then they wanna put that money to somebody else. So it's important that you don't have to be in debt, but you need to be swiping that card every few months or something and paying it off just to keep some activity on it. Otherwise, they will close it. And then our last category is inquiries, and that is how much you are having your credit checked. So that's 55 points. So that is how you would get the full 850 points to have the top credit score. So you don't want to go out, you see you didn't get approved, keep applying with different people, because typically an inquiry is going to ding your credit score about 3 to 5 points. You start gaining those points back within 6 months. Within a year, typically you get the full 3 to 5 points that you lost back, and then it takes 2 years for those credit inquiries to come off from your credit report. But you didn't get approved, you wanna see what the adverse action they are required to send you, an adverse action letter letting you know why you were denied, and you need to work on whatever those issues are before you go and apply for something again. Because it's really not gonna change, and if you do end up getting approved by someone different, most likely you're gonna pay higher. So it's really not worth it. You're better off, you apply for something, you don't get approved, you wait for that adverse action letter to come in the mail, and you see why, what's the problem with your score, and you need to work on that. So, since this is a home buying seminar, the credit score needed to qualify for a home. Each of these loans have different credit score requirements. And this is just a brief breakdown. Becky can probably go more in depth. But typically, to qualify for a home is really 580. However, I do know they can go like down to 500, but you would be required to put even more down.
You are, yeah. I have programs where I can go down to a 500 credit score, but you have it right up there. If your score is lower than 580, you're gonna be required to put at least 10% down.
Yes.
At least. If it's 580 or above, then you have some of the other options like the 3.5% on the FHA.
So the VA loan.
The VA
Because
loan,
that's
there
our
is no
country, I
credit
don't need good
score.
credit.
They're gonna look at the big
Ask me for a veteran.
That's good.
I do have VA information in your folders.
That's a great
So
program for veterans.
It is a really awesome program and it's a 0 down if you're a veteran, yeah. And the DTR, the debt to income ratio, they have a lot more leniency with that. So it's a totally different program.
You got a question?
Yeah, so I like to break down things like I'm not the smartest person in the world, so, basically, before I get them, they get every possible option, I should come to you with 680.
Say that one more time.
To get every best possible option for my home, I should come with 680.
If your credit score is 680, yes, I'm gonna be looking at the best of the best programs for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You really typically do not wanna buy a home if your credit score is not 680. 680 and above, and then you need to look at your own debt to income ratio. Before you even go and get that pre-approval, you wanna pay down and pay off as much as you can, because when they go to calculate, and I'll just go into that next slide, I believe it's next. When they go to calculate your debt to income ratio, they're typically only looking at what's on your credit report when they go to calculate it, and then your mortgage payment. So if you have some bills that's not reported to your credit report, which people can have that, because just because you have an account with a lender, they have to pay to report those to the credit bureaus. The credit bureaus, that's how they make their money. You know, Becky has to pay every time she pulls your credit, you know, to get that information from the credit bureau. So it's really, the lenders they are the customers of the credit bureaus. That's where they're making their money. Because you can get a copy of your credit report for free at least once a year through annualcreditreport.com. You can get a copy of that. You are entitled to that. That is the law. But they are going to look at, in order to qualify your debt to income ratio, everything that is on your credit report. They're gonna add up. So you can do this yourself. You can literally pull up your credit report, and then you can add up every single minimum payment that they show on there. That's how they come up with your debt to income ratio. They're gonna add up all of that information and divide it by your gross monthly income. And typically it can't be over 43%.
Usually we're at about 43% for a regular conventional loan. On FHA, I can go sometimes, depending on the big picture, I can go up to 50, sometimes 53. But we're looking at the entire picture. We're gonna look at your income, your assets, your liabilities. We're looking at everything. So, yeah, I mean, on a typical regular conventional, we're trying to keep you below that 43% because remember, you don't want to be house poor. So like, when I have somebody with a high debt to income ratio, like we go over everything in full detail so you know exactly what you're getting into if you decide you're gonna buy that house with that high of a debt to income ratio.
Because it's gonna affect, they don't take into account really your grocery bill.
Right,
Your
cell phone,
and how much gas you gotta
utilities.
put in your car, that's really not even
Yep.
included. They're looking at items that are on your credit report, those bills. So if you have 10 credit cards, this one has a $50 minimum payment, 20, 200, you have $500 in credit card payments that you have. Then you have car note of $300, that's $800. You know, they're not even, then of course you have to put your house payment in there. So that's $1,000, we'll just say. So now you're already up to almost $2,000. You only bring in $3,500. We haven't even came into if you pay daycare. They're not calculating that. They're not calculating your groceries, your gas, your car insurance. I mean, none of that stuff. Utilities,
cell phone,
cable, they do not put that into the DTI. So you have a high DTI, and they haven't even included that. This is why it's very important to mentally be prepared and mentally be ready, because this is really truly a huge major purchase.
we have a question already.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure to which one, but I don't understand the HARP loan.
The HARP loan,
HARP loan.
that's like, it's kind of like an affordable housing type thing. Each lender or person that you go to is gonna be a little bit different, so on my side, I don't even really look at that. It's more of an advertising type thing, I think.
It's in a book.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. You know, it could be good for some people, but when I'm looking at somebody, you know, I have some programs where I can do 0% down. I have some programs where I can do 3% down, and it's still considered a conventional loan. So, you know, I'm not gonna give you all the details on all of the programs because it's not your job to know all that. You know what I mean? You're putting your trust into somebody like me to know all those programs, to know all the products, so that I can really, you know, go over everything with you and tell you, okay, on this program, this is what you're looking at. On this program, this is what you're, and ultimately it's your decision.
Well, these go to junk mail. But, you know, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a means for advertising to
Right.
get you to call in.
Right.
You know, and when they send you those things, they're not looking at you specifically. They don't know what your credit score is. They don't know what your debt to income ratio is. They just want you to call in. You know what I mean?
The HARP, the OFAs,
All of
I
it.
mean, there's a
Yeah.
So
bunch of them
that's
out
why
there.
they're being screened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so just another piece just in the, home buying process, is just how student loans affect the home buying process.
Ouch.
So there is a system called CAVRs, and I know Becky probably is familiar with CAVRs.
Yes.
That they are going to check, it is part of the home buying process, and they are going to, do a check on you to see if you're in default with any type of government loan, not just your student loans. They wanna see, did you ever go in default with another FHA loan and it got paid off within the last 3 years? Because all that is gonna affect if you can get approved or not. So CAVRs is a system that you're gonna check, because everything doesn't always report to your credit report. So some people may even go through the credit repair process and say, for instance, your student loans are reporting inaccurately, and they delete it, because it's possible. It doesn't show up on your credit report. When she goes to pull your credit report, you're still gonna be responsible and held accountable for tying your student loans into the approval process, because they have to run that CAVRs check. And that's why I wanted to talk about that, as far as CAVRs being a credit alert verification reporting system. And it is operated by the U.S. Department of Housing and HUD. And this system is used to determine if a loan applicant has any federal debt that is currently in default or foreclosure, or has had a claim paid by the reporting agency within the last 3 years. Because again, Becky can attest to, you can be denied just because it's not on your credit report, and you still have either student loans or something happened with a prior home that you either used that was government backed. It can affect you being approved for the home buying process.
What's that 3 years start from the, what's the 3 years that they're looking at from the time that you apply for, a loan, or by the time
This
that-
will be from the time that you went into default. So this, when she talks about that private mortgage insurance, so say you went into the foreclosure process, that's what that private mortgage insurance is for. If you default on your loan, that insurance is gonna come in and pay it off. And so if that happens, it's gonna show up in CAVRs that you were a person, they had to pay off an FHA loan for you. So if it's during that 3-year time period, you wouldn't qualify for another FHA loan, because it's gonna show up in there. And the same with student loans are considered a government-backed loan. And if you're in default or having any issues with your student loans, that has to be in order, or you cannot move forward
Right.
during that process.
What about medical? Medical bills, outstanding medical bill, does that affect the credit score and bureau?
Absolutely,
Like
because
the
this
other
is,
one?
so this is the thing, medical bills are considered like the low hanging fruit. However, from a credit standpoint, there's so many different versions of your credit score. You have tons of credit scores. So like the FICO 9 and the FICO 10 version, they typically are not weighing heavily on medical bills, not even counting them, but our industry, the most widely used FICO version is 8. not FICO 9 or the new version, FICO 10. And then during the mortgage process, it's the Experian 2, the second version, TransUnion 4, the fourth version, and TransUnion 5, the fifth version of Equifax, that they are using the middle score of those 3 FICO versions. I know it's so confusing, but this is literally what she can attest to that. Those are the versions. So when you go online and pull the industry standard, which is FICO 8, the 8th version of FICO, that's typically what customers see. But you have an auto score, and you have a credit card score.
Or like when people pull Credit Karma.
No.
Oh my
Credit
God,
Karma.
it's fancy.
They use a different scoring
That's
model than
advantage.
like what mortgage
No.
companies do, and it's totally different, and it's kind of deceiving to the customer because a lot of people use that Credit Karma score, and 9 times out of 10, that Credit Karma score is higher than what it is when I pull your credit.
So the auto industry must use a different one.
Yeah, they do.
See, cause
Yes,
I was
they
like,
The
where
auto
am I getting this number
industry
from?
uses the auto FICO 8. That is the most widely used auto FICO version that they use.
That is very inflated.
Yes. So, and the reason why that is, this is why it's different, is because when they are looking at your score from an auto standpoint, they're really not taking into account how you manage credit cards. They want to know how their algorithm is mainly weighing heavily on how you pay installment and personal loans over time. So if you always pay that type of stuff, then your auto score is going to look
Yeah, 'cause I was
fabulous.
like, something's
You always
right.
pay your card, but you late here and there on your credit card, they don't really care. They want to see, are you going to pay your card note? And if you pay that good, then your auto score is going to be great. So you are entitled to a free credit report from annualcreditreport.com. You are entitled to that once every 12 months. And you can pull your credit report for free.
Do you trust that accuracy? Is
Absolutely.
it that on that one? Yeah.
Yes.
Annual.
Annualcreditreport.com.
The part really worked in, I guess, with the credit reporting agency. I'm saying that I paid my car a year early. And I get all this notice from the car dealer.
Spend more money.
Yes, yes.
Well,
Buy another one?
Higher amount. It costs a whole lot more.
they are sharing your information like crazy. If you pull your credit report, you'll see soft pulls that are being done on you every day. Companies are literally going in and you can opt out of this where they can't do it, but they are going in and you can see credit inquiries that don't affect your credit score. Where it's showing every time you pull it, whenever you log into a credit monitoring site, you'll see every time while you're getting all of these notices in the mail, oh, you're approved for a car, you're approved for a credit card, because these people are going in and pulling your credit score all the time. They are looking at your information 24/7. See, collection companies are pulling your score. They all of a sudden see that you're paying stuff off and clearing stuff up. They're like, oh, we might be able to get paid.
Get some money.
So they even have a credit check system that they pull to see how you're doing. And so, I know I gotta.
Yeah, but this is a great segue, Raquel, and I want to thank you because this is really valuable information. I am a multiple time homeowner, and today I learned a lot. And when you're talking about credit, my head exploded because there's so many details that you just don't know. So to that point, we're having a seminar. Raquel's going to be focusing 2 hours where she's going to delve into all aspects of credit.
Yes.
It's going to be here March 7th. It's in the afternoon. You can go sign up now on Eventbrite. But I think we have a lot more to
Oh
cover.
my goodness, it's so.
So I thank you because this is good stuff. And I want to thank you all, Jeff, Rachel, Becky. We appreciate it. I learned a ton. I hope that you all walk away with some valuable information.
Did you hear that? A multiple home buyer has learned something.
Yeah.
It's always good to hear things again.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys got a lot out of it as well.
And if you guys have any questions, all of our information is in there. Feel free to reach out, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you.
One question.
Yeah.
How's the house prices range or compare in Greater Houston to, for instance, Boston or Atlanta
or?
Yeah, different,
Los Angeles?
they vary tremendously. You know, each market is different. Demographics, jobs, different things help different cities grow within, you know, how their price ranges also continue to grow. I mean, you go to coastal areas and they're a lot more expensive than the Cleveland, Ohio's of the world. Although I said earlier in the presentation, we are turning the corner and we're gaining more value and we're growing as a city as a whole. Yeah.
And I have one last ask. We are evaluated on the quality of our programming, and you should have received a survey. We ask that you complete that and just leave that on your chair. And if you have not signed in, just everybody, there's 2 sign-in sheets, one for members and one for everyone else. Please do sign in. Please go to Eventbrite, sign up for Raquel's class. We will meet you back here, and do recommend this class to anybody that you think will find value of it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.